down there and he hands off a hostage that escaped. I've never seen so much terror in someone's face.
I'm Neil Cummins. Welcome to Secrets of the Underworld.
And in this episode, I speak with Mick Suesskow, former organised crime squad detective.
Okay, Mick, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me, Neil.
I am very intrigued to see what you're going to tell me about being in the police force and all the stuff that you've done over the years.
So I grew up Western Sydney, single mother.
Yeah.
In housing commission. A few of the places I lived in over the years, you'd see the cops come in and out pretty regularly. It sort of intrigued me, that'd be pretty cool. And then at a young age, my mum put me into the Navy cadets as a young kid, and probably for the best, kept me on the straight and narrow, put a bit of discipline into me. And that sort of changed my mind. I was actually going to join the Defence Force.
Wow.
And I left school in year 10, started doing an apprenticeship in greenkeeping, did a few other jobs here and there, and started the application to apply for the Defence Force. So I was looking at, I was actually going to go in the Air Force, much to the concern of a few of my ex-army mates that are out there. And went to Parramatta, did all the testing for that, and then saw this advertisement. It was back in 2003 where they were doing a really big recruitment for the police. It was like a full-page advertisement, the Daily Telly. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I might have a bit of a look at that. So I started looking into that, and there was avenues for me to get in because I didn't go to year 12. So I did all that, and at the same time still going through the Defence Force application. And cops got back to me first, accepted me in first. So,
wow.
Yeah, so that's the pathway I chose, mate. So
did you go down to Goulburn to do all that?
Yeah, so I went through when there was some really big classes coming through. I was on the back end of an election promise from the government. So my time at the academy was split up. So I did, there was 2 sessions. So it's session 1, and you had a bit of a break where you'd go out and do your field placement, then you'd have session 2. So my session 1 I actually did out at the UWS campus at Hawkesbury.
Oh, yeah.
So, I did my first 16 or 18 weeks out there.
Yeah.
Which was pretty good. Then had the bit of time off. I was actually a bit of a naughty boy during that time. I'm a massive Panthers fan, mate, and there was a game playing at Penrith Park. I think it was the Penrith Panthers versus the Broncos. Mate, I remember it quite well because I think it was Big Ben Ross and Gordon Tallis got in a massive stink at the game, and mate, it rubbed off on us, and we got into a bit of a stink up on Beer Hill. So, and mate, got back to the academy, and I originally got sat out for 6 months. I appealed that and copped a 3-month suspension out of that.
Wow.
And come back in and finished off my time down at Goulburn at the back end of 2003. So I knew it was going to be physically demanding, so I did start training pretty hard.
Yeah.
And when we got down there, the first sort of session was more academically focused. We had to pass a fitness test to progress to session 2.
Yeah.
And the only thing during the fitness test I struggled on, and I've never been a good runner, was the beep test. So, but I made the required cutoff and made it on down there. And once we hit session 2 down there, we actually did PT. So we had PTIs down there, and they took us for runs, running around the academy grounds. We did training sessions, sprint work, and all that. So by the time come for the final assessment, passed it pretty well. So I was happy with myself down there.
Wow.
And
so when you were entered the police force and you passed the test and all like that, where did you want to be stationed at? Did you have a place in mind?
I did. So growing up in Western Sydney, back then it was the Wild West. Probably doesn't compare to Southwest Sydney or other areas, but it was pretty rough. We had a bit of a stigma about us, and I wanted to be close to home, but not in my own area.
Yeah.
So we got given a few choices that we had to put in for. I think we had to put in 3 sort of Sydney metropolitan stations and 2 country stations. So I put in for St Mary's, Mount Druitt, and I think Blacktown. And the 2 country postings, I think I put in Bathurst and Dubbo. Yeah. And in hindsight, it was actually a good thing to do because going to a busy station like that, you learn really quick. Like you're really getting thrown into the deep end, dealing with a lot of domestic violence, a lot of assault matters. It was always busy. Like Friday, Saturday nights was just you never stopped. Working a 12-hour shift in uniform, you start at 6 p.m, mate. You're not stopping through it, or 6 a.m. the next morning. You're on the go. I remember the first day I arrived at the station, because once you leave the academy, you got to go to the station, drop all your equipment off.
Yeah.
And there's really old sergeant there, like he was, the old grey hair. He was old school. He'd been around a while. And I remember he was securing my gun away and that, and putting everything away. And he goes to me, son, I'm going to give you some advice. He goes, this was given to me when I joined many years ago. He goes, there's 3 things in this job that's going to get you into trouble. No, sitting there, 19-year-old me going, oh yeah, what's that, Sarge? He goes, mate, cash, bash, and gash. And I tell you, Neil, he was fucking right.
Fucking hell. So what year was that you started there?
2003.
2003?
2003,
So,
yeah.
And what, you were just doing general duties, or?
Yeah, so I started off in general duties,
Yeah.
which is where you cut your teeth. And, like the academy back then, and it's probably changed these days, but I hope it's changed, but it gave you the foundations. But when you come out, you're buddied up with a training officer.
Yeah.
So for your first 6 weeks, and then you get another 6 weeks where it's just you and your training officer.
Yeah.
And that's where you really learn your trade there. You pick up everything there, how to do it, because compared to how you're taught in the academy, it gives you the fundamentals. But when you're out there running around with your ass hanging out, you've really got to adapt and progress out there. And that's where you really, and I was pretty lucky. I had 2 really great training officers back then. And and picked it up really quick.
Yeah.
And
You weren't nervous? Like,
oh, you're always nervous. Like I remember one of my first shifts, you go into jobs and you don't know what's going to happen. You think, and being 19 too, mate, you didn't have that life experience behind you and just seeing, like, can you imagine, like, you're a 30, 40-year-old person, you got a 19-year-old rocking up and you're telling your life problems to, like it's pretty daunting, and you get a couple of looks and that. But, once you pick it up and the biggest tool you've got is your mouth. It doesn't matter what's around your waist or anything like that. The biggest tool that you have is your mouth, the ability to talk to someone. And, once I matured very quickly, being a 19-year-old, still a kid, wanting to fuck around and that. But, when the job was on, the job was on. When you got back to the station and, debriefing and that, the shenanigans are out, like you just get shit placed in your locker, prawn heads in the phones and just shenanigans going around, it was pretty funny. Like, but, when you're out there dealing with shit all the time, come back into that safe space of the station, have that little bit of decompress and fuck around, have a bit of banter, it's good to just calms you and re-regulates you,
What was the first scene you had to turn up to, like being on general duties and your first time at St. Mary's?
Look, one that stands out was a fatal accident. So I was still in what they call 3 up. So there was me, my training officer, and there was another police officer. So, and it was a fatal accident where a young fella had died. And I remember getting there, and like the car was a mess. I'm pretty sure he was the passenger or the driver. I can't remember if it was the passenger or the driver, but there was 2 people in the car, and one of them had died. And I remember looking in that car, and the thing that still sticks with me to the day was the smell of burning gearbox oil. And that's what really, the smell of, every time I smelt burning gearbox oil, I just remember that first scene of seeing that bloke crushed in that car dead. So
how much does that affect you, like, at that age? Did it or were you too much on the job? But, like,
at the time it didn't. No. And like, you speak to a lot of and back then, a lot of the old heads, mate, there was no talk about, regulating your mental health, looking out for your mental health. It's like, mate, next one, let's go. You got to worry, go and have a drink.
Yeah.
And mate, we did. We drunk. Yeah. So, we used to drink pretty big that back then. Yeah. Like, you'd have your days off and, mate, you'd be out on a bender. So it's just drinking. And it's so vivid when you do remember it. It's really vivid, like you're there.
Yeah. In 2005, Nepean Targets Action Group. What is that?
Yep. So that was a region-based sort of HVP proactive unit, so to say. So back then, I think it was the old Greater Metro area, which is now the Northwest Met area. So it was like an intelligence-driven proactive unit. So we'd had an intelligence coordinator in the unit, and they'd put together, right, so it could have been in that area. There was Marylands at the time. We had the Hawkesbury. We had Mount Druitt, Penrith, St Mary's, Blue Mountains, Quakers Hill. They'd look, right, this day, this is, this sort of crime's peaking out there, so I'm going to send you out there for the day. So we'd go out there. There was a mixture of plain clothes work and uniform work. So we'd go out there and basically just saturate the area, look for antisocial behaviour, drug offences, warrant offenders. An area was getting hit with break and enters. We'd go and float around in there and look for suspicious activity and anyone committing break and enters. Yeah. It was a very good unit. Like we got a lot of results, and it was sort of there to supplement the command that we're working in. Like, the guys that are out there every day, they're getting flogged. They don't have that extra time the ability to go and look for these offenders and look for these offences happening. So that's where we sort of supplemented that time. So we're out there doing patrols, coming across. Like in Blacktown one day, we were Johnny on the spot. I think it was over in Woodcroft. There was a break and enter happening, and we were literally at Woodcroft Macca's grabbing something to eat. So around the corner, get there. I go over the back fence, and sure as shit, here's this bloke in there with gloves on his hand and a bag, and he's just like, "Where'd you come from?" So yeah. So
did you enjoy doing the plain clothes, or do you like being in uniform?
Look, the plain clothes stuff was unreal. You know, like. When I say plain clothes, like a lot of people, they refer to you, you're undercover. Yeah. You're not. You're plain clothes. So you're in this sort of like jeans, t-shirt, shorts, t-shirt with your gun belt on, and you're driving an unmarked car, which, you can pick out. They stand out like dog's balls. But it gave you a bit of a tactical edge because, everyone looks in the mirror. They're looking for marked cars. They don't see unmarked cars. So you get, cars doing silly shit in front of you. And, I've got a story from later on that I can tell you about that when I was at the anti-crime team at St Mary's, which is, a classic example of being in that unmarked car and seeing things happen right in front of you. But the uniform was also good too, because it doesn't matter what you do, that mere presence, like people seeing a uniform, they're not going to commit crime, are they? They go, oh, shit, the cops are there, But then also having that plainclothes advantage, you got more chance of getting them in the act of committing a crime. So,
did you get a lot of respect when you went around to your local areas, walking around or checking on it?
I love when you're around because when you're there, they're not going to be a victim.
They feel safe.
That's right.
They feel safe. In 2006, you're part of the St Mary's local area command.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, so what does that entail? Is that what you're doing basically now, or is it kind of different?
No, so the St Mary's Local Area Command, so that was the command in Western Sydney. So that's gone now. That merged with Penrith a few years ago, and it's now known as Nepean. So it's one big area.
Okay.
But that was our area. So when I went back there after my secondment to the Target Action Group, I joined the anti-crime unit, which was a plainclothes unit.
Yep.
So that was basically targeting like a full-time unit where we targeted antisocial behaviour, street-level crime, street-level drug offences and property offences. And again, that was very intelligence based. So we would also look after, say there's a break and enter at someone's house. Part of that response is a fingerprint technician will go out and gather fingerprints, collect DNA. Any results that would come back as part of those fingerprint hits or DNA would get sent to us for investigation and eventually to arrest the offenders. But we also too looked at drug work. So we reviewed all Crime Stoppers reports, intelligence reports relating to drug houses in the area.
Yeah.
Would launch an investigation on them, would go out there, would do surveillance on them, see if we can work up enough to eventually get a search warrant, execute search warrants on them. Also too, towards the back end there, one of the boys, he put in a lot of work and we got what's called a controlled operation where that allows us to deploy undercover operatives to go and buy drugs. So this was in sort of street level area where we'd have hotspots in the area where drugs would be being sold on the street.
Yeah.
So we'd deploy an undercover operative and they'd go buy drugs and then we'd go and arrest the offenders. It's what they call buy busts. Without going into too much methodology, there is an undercover unit within the police.
Yeah.
When we're putting together these operations, they become involved and help us plan the operations, and they're the ones who assign the operatives.
Okay.
So
how do they pick them then? Because like
mate,
a lot of I've seen a lot of cops and they look too clean cut to go onto the street and buy. You know what I mean? I
have no idea. That's not even police are privy to what they do. They are, and for rightly so, they need to be a secret squirrel unit.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, mate, I've seen some undercover operatives in my time, and mate, I think myself, fuck me. So they're good at what they do, mate. Very good.
Yeah.
So, getting to that story now, while I was there, like we'd work a lot of afternoon and night shifts over a weekend, backing up our general duties crews. We used to have back in the day a lot of parties that would go completely nuts.
Yep.
So there was an intersection in St Mary's, I don't know if you're aware of it, it's Great Western Highway and Charles Haggart Drive. There used to be a Hog's Breath on the corner.
Yes, I know that. Yep.
Now that intersection, there was a major accident there involving some street races many years ago where an elderly couple that were heavily involved in the RSL were killed as a result of that accident. So that was a pretty bad intersection there. We were sitting there one night. We're actually heading back to the station I think we're going to have dinner. And there was a car in front of us. The car in front of us is like one of those Holden Caprice high cars and had the HC number plates. Yeah. So we're behind that car, and anyway, this P-plater pulls up. I think it was in a van or a VS Commodore. Typical Western Sydney P-plater, mate. They got the Commodore, the doof cranking. Anyway, they both start revving their engines, and at the red light. And I looked at the bloke I was with. I said, "Surely they can't be that stupid." Anyway, light goes green. Bang, they're off. floored it, racing, having a drag right in front of us. So we've gone, here we go. So we go up there, and mate, they're pulling about 100 Ks up the highway, So anyway, we managed to light them up, wheel them both over.
Yeah.
So pulled them both over. Anyway, my offsider goes and deals with the young bloke in the Commodore, and I walk up the hire car. Anyway, so talking to the bloke, told him what's going on and that, and, very sheepish gentleman. Anyway, I said, mate, obviously arrested him for street racing, said, get him out the car. As he gets out the car, he turns around to him, he goes, oh, what do I do about the bride and groom? I said, what? He goes, I've got a bride and groom in the back.
What the f?
So not only is he taken this bride and groom to their wedding reception, decides to have a drag race with a P-plater on the side of the road.
Oh my fucking God.
So we get him secured, and sure as shit opened the door, and there's a bride and a groom in the back. Lovely young couple, just got married. And anyway, pulled him out the car and told him what's going on. So I rang my boss, the duty officer, and told him what's going on. He come out, and by that stage, journos had arrived, like with local freelance blokes there.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and anyway, so we dealt with the two offenders, and our boss at the time, the inspector, the duty officer, he put the bride and groom in the back of the police car and drove them their reception in the back of a police car, and they're happy as Larry.
Fucking hell! I thought you were going to say then you're going to let the offenders off then and let them drive into the fucking. Wow.
So, but and that was we were on Channel 9 News that night, pulling over a bride and groom and their offender. And,
wow.
But and given that accident was only very recent, it did cop a high profile, media attention to it. But again, comes down to stupidity. Like, why on earth, particularly when you're driving a bride and groom around, why on earth would you pull that shit at an intersection where an elderly couple were killed from street racing? What really opened my eyes to wanting to become a detective was actually a job that was started whilst I was in the anti-crime team. And at the time, our intel sergeant, great guy, he come to St Mary's from Cabramatta, worked over that area. So he started putting together a heap of reports that were coming in and an investigation into cannabis houses that were being used by Vietnamese organised crime.
Yeah.
So got to the stage where our team and this intel sergeant, we worked together and had enough evidence to go and execute 3 search warrants on 3 separate houses that we believed were cannabis houses. Lo and behold, they were. Mate, I've never seen anything like it before in my life. These whole houses were stripped, gutted, and just converted to hydroponic cannabis houses. So, and as a result of that investigation, it grew exponentially to the point where we executed 10 or 12 search warrants in one day. So we had basically region response. We had detectives from all across the region come out to St Mary's. We had our region commander working out there. We had this, and that's where I first come across the Asian crime squad. Or we had the Asian crime squad coming out to help us, and we uncovered 10. It was either 10 or 12 houses in one day. But as the investigation continued,
all in the same area, or
all around the St Mary's, Oxley Park, Colleton area.
Yeah.
And mate, these houses were full. We're talking about 200 to 300 cannabis plants per house. And we arrested a number of offenders in that day and charged them all with large commercial cannabis cultivation. And that's what really opened my eyes to wanting to go, you know what, this is cool. I want to investigate. I want to be involved in these big investigations. And at that time, I had just been successful in one permanent detective's position at St Mary's.
Yeah.
So when I went into the detectives, I was still working on this operation, which was called Strike Force Pennington. And like, even after we did that search warrant of all of them in one day, we had more come up. We continued to do multiple search warrants, which ultimately led into other neighbouring commands, arresting, charging all these members of Vietnamese organised crime. And it was towards the back end of that, once that investigation was sort of wrapped up and I was back on the floor, I was really eager. I was sending emails off and eventually, which led to a transfer down to the Asian Crime Squad at the State Crime Command.
Oh, okay.
So
what do you do with all that kind of stuff? Like, so if you find all that cannabis and all that, what do you do with it?
It gets burnt pretty much.
Yeah.
It gets destroyed. Something on that level, pretty much, the next day.
The next day it's destroyed.
Yeah. So,
wow.
Because I mean, we had truckloads of it.
Yeah.
So we had nowhere to store it basically. So yeah.
So wait, do you have a place for it to destroy all that kind of stuff? Or do you just
look, I don't know what happened to it. Our boss organised that. I don't know what they do with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's basically destroyed straight away. So
wow. Is that the same when you find money too? What happens when you find money?
Money's different. Money gets banked. So once you get big amounts of cash, it gets banked.
Okay.
So, yeah, it kind of takes that temptation of sticky fingers away. But yeah, and mate, yeah, it's not like the 90s, mate. You can't get away with that stuff anymore. It's all, you know.
Roger Rogerson. Oh, so okay. So now you've gone into detective work.
Yep.
Okay, you're eager now to, like, what's the, like, describe from now moving from where you were as you know, in all these kinds of St. Mary's Command crime squads and all like that, to now becoming a detective. What's that role like now? Are you higher? Are you what's the goal?
Even though you still hold that rank, look, the rank structure there. So I was a senior constable at that stage. The next rank up was a sergeant. Even though you're a detective working in a unit, you're the same rank as a normal uniformed senior constable, but you're just investigating more serious levels of crime, and particularly down at the Asian Crime Squad. Like, we were investigating serious organised crime. Like, we're talking about gangs that have infiltrated Australia from overseas.
Yeah.
We're talking about massive operations here, like transnational organised crime, drug importations, like big stuff that at a command level, you just don't have the resources and the time to investigate.
Yeah.
So even though you're the same rank, you're investigating higher levels of criminality.
Okay. So what you're saying is mostly what you were investigating now is more what the triads and all that kind of thing we're into.
Yeah. So like some of the gangs that we investigated in there, well, one of the groups which I'll touch on as we go through was known as the Big Circle Group, the Big Circle Gang. So the Big Circle Gang was a transnational crime syndicate that was originated from mainland China and included Hong Kong triads, groups called 14K and Sun Yi On.
Yep.
So that eventually spread out into Australia.
Okay.
So you're looking at bigger groups like that, but just more sophisticated groups, you know, like there were still talks. Like I remember we'll do jobs and would come across these offenders, and a couple of guys I work with like, oh, you know, they used to be involved in 5T back in the Cabramatta days and things like that. And I'm like, oh yeah. And, you know, just real interesting at the connections, you know.
What doing a job like this for like looking after, you know, going after syndicates like this, you know, are you ever worried when you're off duty?
I wasn't, so to speak, because a lot of jobs we did was nowhere near where I lived.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, we had some training because we did a lot of our own surveillance in that unit. So we had surveillance training, which involved a bit of counter surveillance training as well.
Yeah.
So you were aware of things. You always, and being a cop anyway, mate, you're always on that heightened level of, you know, fight or flight mode. You're always aware of your surroundings.
Yeah.
But to say I was concerned about running across these guys, no.
No.
And I mean, even if I did, like a lot of the times, you know, they probably wouldn't even remember because, you know, once we did have an involvement with them was during the arrest phase, they probably wouldn't remember afterwards.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. Okay. What was one of the biggest investigations you had to do for that, you know?
Oh, look, there was probably a couple. There's three that stood out, Neil, and I'll go over them briefly for you, mate, not to take up time. But one of them was a strike force where we were looking at an Asian crime syndicate that was supplying guns. So they're selling guns. So we managed to infiltrate that syndicate and start buying guns from this crook. And I mean, some of these guns, mate, we're talking about, they were Mac 10 machine pistols with silencers on them. Like, I've never seen anything like that in my life. I'm looking at these things going, holy shit. You know, we're buying pistols, we're buying revolvers, rifles. And that eventually led us in to another male, a Middle Eastern male. And this is sort of the first time I've ever come across Middle Eastern organised crime figures. And even some of the talk around the unit was, you know, they were starting to see emerging patterns of Asians working in with Middle Easterns. So this Middle Eastern male was selling, and again, I've never seen anything like it. These were manufactured keyring guns. So they were keyring probably the size of a vape or a packet of cigarettes.
Yeah. And
where it would break open, you'd put two 22 caliber rounds in it, put it back together, pull the keyring, and there was two buttons, bang, bang. Mate,
wow.
you could easily conceal that on your keys, walk around with it, and you got a gun in your pocket. Like, it's just, mate,
wow.
Never seen anything like it before. So, you know, we started infiltrating that, and during that investigation, again, something I haven't come across was we come across a bent cop, a dodgy police officer.
In your
not in our unit.
Okay.
That was tied up with this guy that we're buying guns from. So that threw a bit of a spanner in the works because we had to get out the Professional Standards Command involved, and they sort of looked into the police officer a bit, and and he was charged. He was charged with serious corruption offences, bribery, looking up, supplying information to crooks.
Wow.
And this is supposed to be one of our colleagues, like didn't work with us in our unit, was from another command, but it's a cop. Like, what the fuck? Like it's, and for guys like myself and the guys I work with, like it's embarrassing, mate, because what he's doing goes against everything we stood for.
So how long did you do surveillance on him for? Like,
so he popped up whilst we're in the job.
Yeah.
Once it become known who he was, it was taken over by the Professional Standards Command.
Okay.
So, but that job resulted, like that was a really good job, mate. We took so many illegal guns off the street that, particularly those Mac 10 machine pistols, mate, they could have wreaked havoc.
Yeah.
And like we rolled into search warrants on that, seized a heap of cash, heap of guns and some drugs involved in that. And, and that was sort of at the time where drive-bys were coming very prevalent across southwest Sydney. So that was a good one. The other one that stands out was, again, involving the Big Circle group. So we started investigating elements of the Big Circle organised crime group. And early on in this investigation, we become aware of a clandestine drug laboratory over in the Hurstville area. So we started to look into that a bit and executed a search warrant on the 6th floor of a residential apartment complex. And you can imagine, people living around it.
Yeah.
And as soon as we got in the basement of that unit complex, you could smell the drug lab from there.
Really?
Like it was just, it's like, what the fuck, And so we go execute the search warrant, and sure as shit, there's a bloke inside manufacturing meth in this apartment complex. And so he gets arrested, and at that time we had a specialist unit, the clandestine drug laboratory unit. They came out and dismantled that with fire rescue, hazmat, and forensic chemists and that. And I think we were there for 4 to 5 days dismantling that clan lab. And so we charged the offender, which turns out he was a solicitor. He was a lawyer.
What nationality?
He was Chinese.
Wow.
So, but he was a practicing New South Wales lawyer. So, so he was charged with drug manufacture offences and later convicted of that. So,
bloody hell.
But yeah. And then,
did you come across a lot of that kind of stuff? Like,
it was very rare you come across sort of people like that. But again, like at that stage, nothing surprised me. Coming off the back end of that previous job where, you come across a bent cop, it's just nothing surprised me. And then, so, and as a follow-on from that job, we're working on drug importation involving the same crew. And that's when we had involvement with the feds, because obviously anything that's drug importation related or anything like border controlled is the jurisdiction of the Commonwealth. So the AFP become involved. Yeah. So we went and assisted working a job with the AFP. And in that time, we identified this Hong Kong national that had entered Australia through Perth. But his travel into Australia was organised by a big key organised crime figure in Hong Kong. So that really raised our radar, and we started looking into him a bit more, doing surveillance on him and that. So as over a space of a few weeks, we identified where he was living, a bit of a pattern for him, what he would do. And then we're following him one day, and he's in a hire car and he's driving around to all these banks in Sydney. So he went to a bank in Chinatown, went to a bank in St. George, went to a bank in, I think, Hurstville. And then we're following him and he's driving towards the airport. So, and at this stage, I'm on the phone getting updates through other agencies of the amount of cash that was getting deposited in these accounts. Yeah. And we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, Neil, like a lot of cash was getting put in. So he drives to Sydney International Airport. He returns his hire car, pulls a bag out, and he starts walking to the departure gates, like to the entry to the Sydney International Airport. So I'm on the phone and we're having to make a decision, split-second decision. I mean, we're doing surveillance, mate. I'm in thongs and shorts and a shirt, because we didn't expect to arrest anyone that day. And so I made the call to the team, arrest this guy. So, and the looks we got, mate, a bunch of cops doing surveillance. As I said, mate, I was in shorts, T-shirt and thongs, jumping out and arresting this bloke and tackling him as he ran the airport. Mate, the uniformed AFP cops come running in thinking, what the fuck going on here? Like, mate, we're police, this bloke's under arrest. And, so we arrested this guy and took him back to the police station. We got a search warrant for his apartment that he was in. So we hit the apartment, mate, we find 21 kilos of meth, of ice in this apartment, all individually packeted into 1 kilo blocks. And as we've executed the search warrant, what we believe that was a stash house or a safe house. So we think a large drug importation's come in. It's been packaged into these 1 kilo blocks and stored at this house, and that this guy was a runner for that syndicate.
Wow.
So we end up arresting him and charging him with large commercial drug supply. And as a result of that investigation, a couple of days later, we executed another search warrant on an apartment at Walleye Creek. And so the feds are out with us that day as well. We hit that one and we're searching it and we're thinking, fuck, it's a dry hole. There's nothing here. Like it was practically empty, as you do. Like if you ever, as a cop or a detective, you ever hit a place and it's a dry hole and you get nothing, you get shit put on you. Like you get, the banter is real, you get so much shit put on you. So we're going through the kitchen and there's nothing in this kitchen. So I open up underneath the sink and I look in there and I'm like, that's strange. There's 10 litre boxes of water you get from Woolies. Like like big goon bags. There's like about 10 of them sitting there, and I'm like, it's strange. I'm like, what? Let's have a look. Let's see what's in there. So I opened up one, and we had these little pouches, our field test kits called narco pouches. So I thought I'll test it out. So I pulled one open and cracked it open and squeezed a bit of what I thought was water. Yeah. And as soon as it come out, there's a pale yellow colour. I'm like, that's not fucking water. So anyway, I cracked the test kit, and when you're testing meth you sees on the street, it comes up like a normal blue, like a colour of my jumper. Yeah. When I cracked this open, mate, it was that dark, it was almost black. Like it was a strong meth. So we've called in our specialist teams, our forensic chemists and our clan lab guys, our drug squad guys to come and give us a hand. And yeah, mate, it ended up being 100 litres of pure meth oil. Wow. And I think you calculate that, the yield, you're looking between 50 to 80 kilos of product yielded out of that. What the fuck? So it wasn't a dry hole after all, mate. It was good. We didn't have shit put on us. Yeah. We actually got praised by our bosses. That was good.
No pay rise?
Definitely no pay rise. But yeah, and then, so that was a pretty good job. Like, getting those guys involved in that syndicate. And then, and then another one that stood out was another job we worked on where we were infiltrating a syndicate that was in the process of importing a heap of meth ice from China, from overseas. So we infiltrated this group. We met with one of the syndicate members who travelled up from Victoria, and where we put a down payment. So we gave this bloke cash as a down payment as, we're keen for this shipment that's coming in to buy into it. Neil, to look at this bloke, mate, he looked like a kid, just a young Asian kid. You wouldn't pick anything of him. Yeah. You wouldn't look twice him past the street. So we handed him that cash, and then, we continued on with our investigation. He got surveilled back to Victoria. Thank God I wasn't on that surveillance team because they literally drove down to the Victorian border that night and had to stay somewhere in just the clothes and the same undies they had on. And then later on, we got contacted by the syndicate going, right, you've bought in now, we're going to give you a sample where, we'll meet you and give you a 1 kilo sample of this product. Yeah. So we set up a location, put surveillance in place, and, mate, it was a weekday afternoon. The steps of Town Hall in the middle of the city, people everywhere. And, mate, this exchange happened with a kilo of ice. And the bloke that delivered it, again, Asian male, 50 years old, wearing clothes from Lowe's, mate, Kmart clothes. You would not pick this bloke. So that exchange took place, and as the investigation progressed, we identified 2 shipping containers that were currently on a ship bound for Australia. Wow. They were intercepted at the border down at the port, and lo and behold, mate, 600 kilos of ice. 600 kilos? 600 kilos of ice. So we identified a factory unit they were going to in southwest Sydney. Yeah. We deployed surveillance on that unit, and we ran an operation, what's called a controlled delivery. So where they do a controlled delivery of these containers to the unit. And when they were dropped off, there was a group of Asian men there, predominantly Chinese. They started unpacking the container, and they were hit by not only New South Wales, but the AFP Tactical Operations Unit, and all arrested. And 600 kilos.
Do you know what kind of like syndicate is probably the most at bringing drugs into Australia?
Back at that time was the Asians.
Yeah.
They're the OGs, mate. I don't care what anyone says to me. When you're talking organised crime, Asians are the OGs. You know, they don't go and, like, you look at the Middle East organised crime figures, mate, they're driving AMG Mercedes, they're flashing their cash. They get seen.
Yeah.
Mate, an Asian organised crime boss wears clothes from Lowe's or Kmart and drives a 1996 Toyota Camry or a Honda Accord Euro. You would never pick them. Never pick them. You know, there's been instances where a vehicle like that's been stopped and they've pulled $5 million cash out of a boot or 100 kilos of heroin. Like, it's just...
What do they normally like want to bring in? Is it heroin and all that kind of stuff for the middle?
Neil, the Asians are businessmen. You'd find with a lot of Asians, they don't use their own product. They are solely businessmen. They'll bring in whatever they can get their hands on. Heroin, ice, coke, grass. Even you're looking at pseudoephedrine. Like, pseudoephedrine become a big commodity back then because with the crackdowns on getting the pseudoephedrine here in Australia. And at one stage, there was some product coming in that we're looking at. It was called Contact NT. And they were little capsules with what looked like hundreds and thousands in them. It was pseudoephedrine. So these guys are selling these capsules of pseudoephedrine. You know, like we hit a house one night. We received some information from another agency. And we went and hit this house and we found kilos and kilos of this Contact NT. We found a gun. We found over 100 grand cash. You know, whatever commodities that these guys could get their hands on and bring into the country and sell, they'll sell. Yeah. Because the prices they get over here are phenomenal for it. I mean, back then, a kilo of ice, you're probably looking anywhere between $150,000 to $200,000 a kilo of ice back then. I wouldn't have a clue what it's worth today, obviously inflation, but yeah, like to some of the overseas crime families, mate, Australia was known as Treasure Island.
Wow. So what happened? How long did you stay in that?
So I was in there for a couple of years, and then in 2012, I got the opportunity to go and work on secondment to the homicide squad. Yeah. At that stage, there was quite a few shootings involving motorcycle gangs and organised crime figures happening. Yeah. And
where were you stationed for this one?
So I was working out of police headquarters, and I mean, it's all been reported on the media. Yeah. He was shot and killed outside of a wedding in Canleyvale, and I think another 2 guys were shot but survived. I think another patch member and maybe an associate or a nom. Yeah. So we started working on that, and as that investigation progressed, it turned out that that murder was involved in it with a number of other shootings. So what they did is they merged a number of strike forces into one large strike force to investigate all these shootings. So there was a shooting. We obviously had ours. There was another shooting. Again, all this is in the media. A shooting of a fella named Roy Yagi and Jamie Grover at Wentworthville on the 30th of August 2012. There was another non-fatal shooting of a man in Rhodes in November 2012. There was a fatal shooting of a fella named Ali Eid, and then there was another man who was shot who survived in Punchbowl in November 2012. And then you had another fatal shooting of a fella named Bashir Arja, who was shot and killed in Punchbowl in December 2012.
And this is all linked to...
All linked together. So, and this was really my first involvement with motorcycle gangs to this level. Yeah. I mean, over the past, I've had involvements, particularly at St Mary's, I've arrested and charged them with like drug supply, even with firearms, picking up with firearms and weapons offences. But to this degree, this is my first ever time involved in that. And this is the first time I experienced the wall of silence from them too. You know, like there was at the wedding that we were sort of looking at, there was over 350 guests there. Yeah. And, you know, you go and try and interview them and try to get across that, you know, you're there trying to get justice for what happened to this young bloke that was killed. Didn't want to borrow us, mate. Didn't want to talk to us. You know, you'd rock up to, a member's house and what do you want? You know, we're here looking at this. Fuck off. Don't want to talk to you. Get fucked. You know, and it was like, well, okay, see you later then. Yeah. But yeah, so...
You're not allowed to push any further than that, are you? If they don't want to talk, they don't want to talk. You can't.
They don't have to, mate. They don't have to talk. No. Yeah. You know, and like and they're not suspects; they're witnesses. Yeah. And it made our job very hard. And I think still to this day, the murder of that young fella is still unsolved. Like, that never got solved.
Yeah.
So
there was no links at all. They couldn't find any links without the.
look, there was numerous suspects, but not enough evidence to prosecute or bring charges up against them.
Is it? Would you say that that's probably that kind of line of work is the most difficult when you're dealing with motorcycle clubs?
It is. It's hard because like there's that stigma of us versus them.
Yeah,
and mate, in my time, and I had pretty good mentors when I was coming up through the ranks, where I was always taught no matter who they are, what they are, you talk to them like a human being.
Yeah.
And I did that. Every time I was involved in talking to members of motorcycle clubs, I spoke to them like a human being.
Yeah.
And like I used to be a smoker. So, and mate, I'd just have a smoke with them, talk to them. And particularly a lot of the older ones before the sort of influx of Middle Eastern into the motorcycle groups, they're respectful. They said, it's a game. You've got your game, we've got our game. And there was that mutual respect.
Yeah.
Where, and I'm sure you would have seen over time, once you had that Middle Eastern influx into them, that's when they started, you couldn't talk to them. They'll be like, oh, fuck you, fuck off your dog, all that sort of stuff. And that's the change, like when you're dealing with the original, like the old school bikies, how you going? They'd come up, how you going, mate? How are you? Yep, good, no problems. There was that mutual respect, You
don't think it was because of how harsh the Raptor squad were on them?
Look, I think the Raptor squad, they played a good role. And I mean, and you would have seen yourself, Neil, like working in the cross, when these Middle Eastern outlaw motorcycle gangs started coming in, they drew attention to themselves. They really stood out. They made themselves known, which caused a lot of punters out there on the street who, to be scared of them. So how do you combat that? You bring in a unit that's, and I mean, this is only my opinion.
Yeah.
You bring in a unit that's going to match their level. And
the only thing I've got and I've witnessed is the fact of when Raptor Squad did come in, there was some there who used that power a bit too much. And there's some there where that you could talk to them and, have a decent conversation. They would target the people like me. I got targeted because they knew who I was.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and the ones that targeted me were disrespectful in a way where they used the power to their knowledge, how to talk to me.
Yeah.
Whereas a plainclothes copper, I could talk to him in a good way. But Raptor Squad never had that respect, and I think that's why when they go and they pull over a motorcycle club, they use that power to and disrespect them. You know what I mean? Like it's like when they go to funerals. You know what I mean?
Yep.
To me, this is my point of view. When a motorcycle club are going to a funeral for one of their colleagues, and they're pulled over, and they want to do regos on their bikes or do this. There's a time and place to do that, and I think that's where they've lost their respect with some of the motorcycle clubs. I don't know. Yep. I don't know if that's.
And look, as I said, I never worked with the Raptor guys. Like I knew, and I had friends that worked in the unit. But at that stage, Neil, there was 15,000 cops in New South Wales, and as you can imagine, we called them lunch money victims, belters. You had dickheads in every job.
Yeah,
was there dickheads in the cops? 100%. Mate, I had colleagues that were dickheads, that would talk shit behind my back. I couldn't give a shit, but you're always going to have dickheads in any job you go to, you know, and that's what made it really hard is because for the actions of one dickhead, everyone's tarnished.
Yeah.
Mate, I work with some of the best cops I've ever come across. There's people like Gary Jublin and one of the other guys, Russell Oxford. If something ever happened to my family where they were killed, I would want people like that to investigate them.
Yeah.
Because they were the OGs. And as a young detective coming up, people like that is who we looked up to, And again, you're always going to come across dickheads and they're the ones that ultimately and give you the bad name. And again, this is where media comes into it. And I know particularly Raptor got a bad name because of what was put on media.
Yeah.
Media will give you 30 seconds of a 5-10 minute video.
Correct.
They don't know what's happened leading up to it.
Well, so did you enjoy doing that?
I did, but I love doing the drug work better.
Yeah.
Yeah. The surveillance, the being, And someone said to me one day, why do you like doing the drug work and the surveillance work and that sort of stuff? So, because you get to fuck with people. Like it's, you could be doing surveillance on someone, watching them do a drug, and they have no idea you're there.
Yeah.
And then
I think that's more exciting, and it's more because
it's
instead of going down to I'm going to go down to the Mossad club at the clubhouse and do this, your surveillance on somebody for a few weeks or months. To me, there's a big achievement in that.
Absolutely, there is. Like particularly with the drug houses in going back to a local level. Like we knew there was drug houses, we could just sit off it and people going to and from, stop and get the drugs. But why put that time and effort in for your little seizures when you can work the big one up and get the big fish?
Yeah.
So
what was your next venture after that? How long did you stay in that?
So I was there for about 12 months.
Yeah.
And then 2014,
How come only 12 months? Were you just taken off there? Or
so I kind of I said to you, there's belters in every job.
Yeah.
Kind of had a bit of a run-in with one of the people there. And so I went back to the Asian Crime Squad, which was in the process of being disbanded.
Okay.
So more or less got told I had to find a new home, which was pretty. It's pretty disappointing, really. Like the Asian Crime Squad has a rich history. It started, I think it started back in the early 90s. It was originally known as Task Force Oak.
Okay.
Moved on to be known as the DEA Task Force 3, Organised Crime Southeast Asian Crime Squad, and finally Asian Crime Squad. So it's been operating for quite some time.
Yeah.
And so I had a long think of where I wanted to go, and so I decided to go back to what I know. So I went back to St. Mary's as a detective at St. Mary's.
Wow.
So
was that disappointing for you?
Not really, no. I knew the people out there. You had good work. They had some really good investigators working there, and like for me at the time, it was better the devil you know. Like I know that area.
Yeah.
I knew still knew a lot of the staff that worked there. We had good sergeants in the detective's office at the time.
Yeah.
And so went back there and, I enjoyed it. It was easy to settle back in, like I never left the joint, to be honest. But even still going back with the knowledge and the skills that I developed over that 4 years down at the State Crime Command, it was good because a lot of local detectives didn't get experience the type of work we did, the type of warrants we had to apply for, your telecommunications interception warrants, your surveillance device warrants and things like that.
Yeah.
So to be able to share some of that knowledge too with the colleagues, and it was good, really. And it was a good time.
What job actually sticks in your mind now that, you just go, wow, you know what I mean? I was involved in that.
Probably quite a lot of them, really. Like a lot of them stand out. And I mean, two ones that still stick to me this day is when I went back to St. Mary's. So, Wednesday, 18th of June, 2014, State of Origin Game 2.
Yeah.
I was working the evening shift detective's car, and I was having a coffee with the duty officer. Now, that duty officer, she had just transferred to St. Mary's. She used to be the inspector that ran the homicide squad intel unit.
Oh, wow.
So she just transferred to St. Mary's. So we're catching up, having a coffee with her. And we heard what we thought was going to be one of the first of these types of jobs come over the radio. It was a brawl in Colton. We thought, here we go. Origins, kicking on. It's going to go. So we thought, we'll head over there. There's plenty of cars have gotten onto it and they're heading there. So we'll finish the coffee and we'll head over there. We heard a call on the radio. One of the cars that were there was got on the air and said, a male's been shot and we're doing CPR. Bang. Drop everything. We're on our way out there. So race out to the scene. And as we get there, the ambulance are there loading this 18-year-old fella by the name of Jed Coates.
Yeah.
Freshly 18 onto the stretcher, and he wasn't in a good way. He'd been shot through the neck. So they go to leave, and emotional family rock up, and we're trying to block the ambulance to get to their brother. So, got the ambulance, got out of there. We eventually locked the scene down, started organising that. And by the time he arrived at Westmead Hospital, I got the phone call that he was dead. So, right, that's it. It's now a homicide investigation. So we recalled a number of our detectives from our office locally. Yeah. We commenced an investigation in that, started canvassing witnesses, and within the first hour, we knew who the offender was. So the offender was a couple of years above this young bloke at school. They'd sort of had loose connections at school during high school, and they were both at a nearby pub watching the Origin. And what eventually became clear is during our investigations was there was an altercation at the pub between the two.
Yeah.
And one thing that really shitted me was the media portrayed it to be a fight over state of origin, just because one was going for Queensland and one was going for New South Wales. Wasn't the case.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that was one thing that pissed me off, was that was what they were advocating across all the news networks when they reported on it. So as our investigation took place, we identified who the offender was. We're currently in the process, because a firearm was involved, was trying to get our tactical operations unit out to go into his house and arrest him. Just happens to happen that he came out and spoke to one of the detectives saying, "Oh, no, well, what's going on here?" And my partner at the time, good operator, who's still a detective this day, really good operator, he grabs him and arrests him, goes, "Mate, you're in." So rings me up, goes, "We got him, he come out himself." So me and this other detective, we take him, he gets transported to the police station where we interview him. We ultimately charge him with murder. So he was charged and bar refused within the first few hours.
Wow.
But with a job like that, even though he was arrested and charged and put before the court the next day, the investigation's still ongoing, mate. We had tons of evidence together, lots of lines of inquiry to follow up, and, you know, we formed a strike force to investigate that. We had assistance come out from the homicide squad to help us. And one of the guys that actually come out from homicide squad, I used to work with an Asian crime squad, who unfortunately is not with us anymore. He took his own life years ago, Childsy. Great guy, really good dude. So he came out with a couple of his colleagues and gave us a hand during that investigation. And cut a long story short, we went to go to trial, and the day the offender that we charged, it's been publicised, his name is Matthew Perry.
Yeah.
And this is strange. We actually found out that he was a member of the Rebels, but the Fiji chapter, during the investigation. And that's when we started to see the progressive motorcycle clubs popping up overseas. And so Matthew Perry was charged, and on the day of trial he pled guilty to murder, which as an investigator and to me was like a good feeling, because it's knowing that I did my job right.
Good.
There was nothing in my job that they could use to try.
What was the altercation over? Do you know?
It was an ongoing feud that was from their high school days.
Wow. And
ultimately culminated into the young Jed Coates being accused of stealing a motorcycle belonging to Matthew Perry.
Okay.
There was never any evidence of that ever happening. So after he pled guilty, Matthew Perry was sentenced to 17 years and 6 months with a non-parole period of 13 years and 6 months. Look, I get that they had to take into consideration a discount for his plea to guilty, but 13 years for murdering an 18-year-old kid that's recently turned 18 doesn't sit well with me at all. So,
but that's there's a lot of that going around in the system though, where it just doesn't sit with what people do. You know what I mean?
100%.
You know what I mean? And then you've got people crying out, you know, if you take a life, does the system need to take your life? You know what I mean? Like America does.
You know, like it's. And I was only talking to one of the first responding officers back then the other day, and I didn't realise this. So every anniversary this comes around, the first two officers that were off at that job still have a drink for young Jed.
Wow.
And so it's and that's the thing. It doesn't just affect the families; it affects us that go there. You know, and I've always said that the biggest thing I struggled with over the years, which culminated towards the end of my career, it wasn't seeing the dead bodies. It wasn't dealing with dead bodies or the gore. It was the emotional family. Having to deal and talk and liaise with the emotional family is what ultimately got me, you know.
Is there a lot of, in the police force, well, there would be, is there a lot of who want to take their own life or have taken their own life because of the mental stress from it? Yeah,
like the one I spoke about before, Childsy, I'd never picked it. He was a great guy. You know, I worked with him when he was at the Asian crime squad, and then he moved on to the homicide squad, and when I went back to St. Mary's, and he was a very humble man. Like, you know, I learned a lot off him when he was at the Asian crime squad. Very knowledgeable. And
what do you think it is that makes them like just want to do that and snap?
Um, Look, I don't know, Neil, and I mean, look, I can only talk on my own experiences, and like later on, I'll touch on it when I go into my struggles. Sometimes it's the feeling of, and me personally, when I went through my struggles, was I felt like a burden to my family and friends, that I was putting them through the pain, and that they don't deserve to go through that. That's how I felt, and that's when I was contemplating taking my own life. That's ultimately what was going through my mind at the time.
But what? Yeah, but what makes you from that police force? Is it the stress of the job? Is it stress from the pay? Is it stress because they put too much on you, the police force? Like, what is it that makes you go like that?
Well, it's hard for me, Neil. So
Or is it because you've left and you feel that there's no they haven't looked after you like they should have looked after you?
look, they say they look after you. They didn't. They don't. You know, like, mate, there was, so when I was working at St Mary's as a detective, I was driving, I went and had dinner. I was on an afternoon shift and I was driving back home one night, and I was on the M4 motorway heading back to St Mary's. And as I was driving there, I was in the detective's car by myself. I saw a car stop in the middle of the road. There was a truck off to my left-hand side. So I stopped, made sure everything's okay, and there was a dead body in the middle of the road. And it had someone who'd been he ran out in front of a truck that was driving the motorway and got hit and killed. And I still remember there was an off-duty nurse come over, and she's like, "Oh, I'm a nurse. I'll go make sure he's okay." And I'm like, "Darling, you don't want to go over there. You don't want to see this guy." She's like, "No, it's all right." And then I just remember hearing her scream. He wasn't in a good way. He was not in a good way at all. The next day, I got a call from our employee assistance program to ask if I was okay.
Yeah.
And I said to him on the phone, I said, "Not really, no." You know, like this one kind of stuck with me a bit. And the woman I spoke to goes, "Oh, okay." She goes, "Am I able to schedule an appointment down the track?" She goes, "I need to go and catch a train. Is that okay if I do that?" And I was like, "You know what? Go f yourself. Get fucked. I don't want your help. If that's, you want to make an appointment so you can catch a fucking train, don't call me again."
Wow.
That's one of the ones that stood out to me, as if they don't care. They're ticking a box.
Yeah.
You know, and I hope to God that's changed today. But at that point in time, what's the point? You know, I'd rather go sit with the boys and have a drink and get shit-faced and numb the pain that way, you know? And I mean, that progressed over time, Neil, as I, you know, like a few more jobs. Straight after this Jed Coates murder, mate, I was back on the floor investigating other crimes, and then we had and this is probably another one that really stuck with me. So I was on the day shift and I was about to go home, and our afternoon shift detectives were tied up with a robbery. So the supervisor calls out to me at the time. Now, that supervisor he was a uniformed sergeant, but he was an OG detective, mate. He spent a lot of time as a detective senior constable, knew his shit. And he goes to me, he goes, "Look," he goes, "we've got this job coming." He goes, "A woman's gone to her boyfriend's house. He's not there. The front door's unlocked, open, his car's in the driveway, and there's some blood, but he's nowhere to be seen." He goes, "Can you come out with me and we'll go and have a look?" Oh, yeah, no problem. So went out with him. We get to this job, walk up, and yeah, his door's open, his fly screen's ajar. His partner was sort of waiting out the front for us. And we go in, there's a bit of blood around the floor. So we go in and just looked like a normal house, you know. Didn't know nothing about this guy at the time. And as I walk in there, I can just smell the overpowering smell of cleaning product, like bleach. And this is really weird. So we're walking around, and as we go upstairs, we look in the bedrooms. And from looking at the bedrooms, he had two kids, a girl and a boy. And I'm like, okay, so you got kids. By that stage, one of the afternoon shift detectives had become available, and he came to assist us. He had found a CCTV camera on one of the front, because it was like a townhouse block.
Yeah.
So he went down there and started reviewing footage. He saw, like, obviously the car that was in the driveway, so it gives him a point to what to look for. So he goes down and starts doing that. So anyway, I go in this house, and there's no sign of this bloke. Like, you know, I think his car keys and house keys were still there. So I go in the garage, and I look in the garage, and I see this rug rolled up. Curiosity got the better of me, so I unrolled this rug. As I've unrolled this rug, there's blood on this rug, blood stains. There's TV remotes with blood on them. There's power cords with blood and smearing on it. And I let the sergeant know I was with, so straight away we pulled out, declared it a crime scene, locked the place down. In that time, the other detective, he had seen a timeline of this victim's car coming home.
Yeah.
Not long after he got home, he sees a female walk up. He didn't know anything of it at the time, but this proved paramount later. And then, as a timeline of events, a car drives in and then drives out. So by this stage, the afternoon shift detectives come on board, and the officer in charge of this matter was actually the fella who was the officer assisting me in the Jed Coates murder.
Okay, yeah.
Again, as I said, gun investigator, like good bloke to have on this job. So we launched an investigation into that. At this stage, we didn't know what we were dealing with, whether it was a kidnapping, a homicide, whatever. And during this investigation, we learnt that the victim was an ex-member of the Defence Force, and we're like, where are these kids? We started panicking. Where are these kids? So things were put into place. Some very good investigation was done by the team. And the woman that I mentioned that was on CCTV was later identified to be Brett's ex-partner, the mother of these two children. The car that drove in after that was her new boyfriend. So what we managed to piece together was that Brett was attacked by his ex-partner in the house and ultimately bundled into the boot of that car and taken away. Again, we didn't know what we were dealing with. So we're dealing with this as the highest it could possibly be, a potential murder. And that's what we do. We always work at the highest level and you work back down. So through more investigation, this led us to a property up in the Tuggerah region, in the Tuggerah Lakes region. As a result of that, some of our team travelled up to that address and met some local detectives and executed a search warrant on the house of Brett's ex-partner. At the house was the vehicle that we saw on CCTV. During a search of that vehicle, a lot of blood was found in the boot. A lot of blood. So the male and the female, his ex-partner and her new partner, were arrested. The children were found in that scene. The children were recovered. They were safe.
They were safe?
They were safe in that house.
Wow.
So they were arrested and taken back. At the time, I was managing the original crime scene at St Mary's.
Yeah.
And during that crime scene examination, and it's widely known that's used a chemical called luminol. It's where they spray it and under a specific light shows you blood.
Okay.
A luminol examination was conducted downstairs of the victim Brett's house, and it lit up like a Christmas tree. There was so much blood.
Wow.
So, so that was a long night. So we had a lot of things going. And it wasn't until early the next morning, the officer in charge of the matter got a phone call from, he's known as the duty operations inspector. So they work in town and they coordinate sort of the communication centres and everything that comes in, like on-call responses through squads and homicide and all that come out through the duty operations inspector. So the guy running the investigation gets a call from him saying, look, a body has been found in the Central Coast area, just north over the river of Wiseman's Ferry. We don't know if it's linked to your case or not, but a dead body has been found that matches the description of the fella you're looking for. So through inquiries made with the Central Coast detectives at the time and that, it turned out to be our victim, Brett.
Wow.
He was dumped in a driveway on a rural property out in that area.
Just dumped on a driveway?
Just dumped on a driveway. Like nothing, And I mean, this guy was a father. And
what was the motive for killing him?
So he had sole custody of the kids.
Yeah.
His ex-partner had a drug problem and she wasn't allowed to see the kids, obviously through safety issues.
Yeah.
And when we did the investigative search of his house, you could tell he did everything for those kids. So there was, in his room, you could see the TV had been ripped off his wall and put into his daughter's room. The photos, everything. And from accounts of family, he just devoted everything to those children.
Wow.
It took him a long time to get custody of them. And so the motive that started appearing was that she wanted the kids,
Yeah.
or wanted access to the kids. And, and as a result, he was killed because of that. Yeah.
Like listening to you, excuse me, listening to you tell the story, and I can see just from you telling it how it's still emotional to tell a story like this. But to on the day to leave that, go home, and at the time you've got a family or your whatever's going on, how much trauma and pressure and everything is going through your head to deal with scenarios like this every day.
So on that one, it was at the time I'd worked obviously that day shift that it happened into the next day.
Yeah.
By the time I got home, I think I had 3 hours sleep and I was back again, continuing to work on it. And afterwards, I remember going home and just sitting there and just sitting out under my back veranda for hours, just sitting there looking into space.
Like I don't want to say that you or anybody does it, but to me, it made me want to fucking drink. It made me want to. This is the only way I could think of. Like
I started, mate.
Yeah,
I started. Yeah, and I mean, and later on down the track, it got worse. You drink to numb the pain. And
even though it's not your pain,
that's right.
You're numbing it because of you've got involved in it, and it feels like your pain.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just like you try to deal with it as you do. Like I was pretty lucky. There was a good group of guys that I sort of were friends with. That we all worked together, and mate, we'll go and have a drink and talk about it. But again, mate, and this is when I reflect. This is where I started to sort of disassociate myself. So I wouldn't leave home. And it progressively got worse. And then, so rolling on after that job, like, I went back on the floor and started just, getting to other jobs. And again, that job was run by the other detective and one of the other guys. And, mate, they did a cracking job on that. They secured convictions on everyone. And it wasn't just those two that were the male and female, they were arrested and charged for the murder and everything. But there was other people identified during that investigation that those guys managed to arrest and put before the courts. So, and I mean, back in the time I was on the floor on, attending to other jobs and other investigations. I was just sort of, it was like business as usual. You just put on a brave face, come to work, do your job. And then,
Didn't it want to make you leave?
Not really.
You happy doing?
Happy? Yeah. Look, because you could have the shittest day in the world, be abused, be spat on, be punched, be kicked. But when you've made a difference to a family or to a relative of a victim, mate, that's what made the job.
So what did make you leave then?
Well, it all started probably from this date that I'm about to roll into now. So we rock into December 15th, 2014. I was on the afternoon shift detectives at St. Mary's. And I was working with a guy who was doing his, it's called an A-list assessment. So when you want to become a detective, you got to go up first and do what's called this A-list assessment. And I was working with him and I couldn't have been luckier. Like this guy was a great operator, really good cop, switched on. And I think everyone remembers that day to, popping the news on and seeing what was unfolding at Martin Place in the city.
Yep.
And so... I remember looking at that, going, feel sorry for those guys responding to that. So go to work, met up with my officer that night and getting ready for our shift, make a cup of coffee. Our crime manager comes down so the hierarchy that runs a police station is you've got the superintendent, local area commander, he's officer in charge, and generally the second in charge is the crime manager who generally looks after detectives and all that sort of stuff. So he comes down, speaks to me and my side and goes, guys, yous are being sent into the city on a region response for the Link Cafe. And I've gone, fuck, okay. So we head into the city that night. We go and get briefed and we're deployed to the forward command post, which was at the New South Wales Leagues Club on Phillip Street, just near the Supreme Court and just down from the actual cafe. Yeah. So, so we get tasked to do a number of things and, and I mean, and when I talk about this, I feel I don't have a right to talk about my involvement because it was that small. The guys that were there that night, our tactical operations officers, the other negotiators, everyone else, mate, they are the OGs of that night. They did such a good job, and so at one point there, I was on the steps of the Leagues Club, that led out onto Phillip Street, just looking down at the cafe, and I was talking to another fella there, and heard this bang, like a large bang. This is maybe about 2:30 in the morning, and I looked at this guy, and he looked at me, and I'm like, "Is that a gunshot?" And he goes, "I don't know." Next minute, we see all the tactical operations guys, and I mean, mind you, these guys, tactical operation guys, had been there since the beginning. They've been there for hours, mate. They start to form up, and we're looking down going, fuck, it's going to be on here in a minute. And then next minute, I could hear someone calling out. It was one of the other detectives that was deployed a bit further down. He's calling out to us. So I ran down there, and he hands off a hostage that escaped. One of the cafe workers, little Fiona Ma. I still remember her name, and I still remember the look on her face when I took hold of her and ran her up to the Leagues Club. I've never seen so much terror in someone's face. Like, this poor young girl looked mortified. And I remember running her into the Leagues Club to the area to hand her off to other police and to get looked at. And she had hold of my arm so tight that it was actually hurting me. And I remember saying, "You're safe now. You're safe." So after that, I went back to the stairs where the other fellow I was sort of with was hanging, and mate, all hell broke loose. There was flashbangs going off. There was stun grenades. There was gunshots. It just, what felt like an eternity, but was probably however long it took.
Yeah.
Just was like a war zone. And when that gunshots and all the banging stopped, the fire alarms, and that's what I remember vividly, was fire alarms going off everywhere and the smell of gunpowder. And then at that stage, I saw one of the other cops was yelling out. They were unloading hostages out of the cafe onto the side of the footpath.
Yeah.
And one of the other guys was yelling out, "Hey, come grab this, come grab this." And I went down. There's another hostage that they'd pulled out. And that was Selena. So I grabbed hold of her and ran her up. And I don't know if it was like shock of the ordeal had set in, but she kept saying to me, "My shoes, where are my shoes? Can you get my shoes?" And it was odd because after that just going down, the last thing I'd be worrying about was my fucking shoes. Yeah. So we took her up, and at that stage let her go and into the area there and go back out to where I was. And by that stage, all the tactical operations guys had retreated and come back. And I just remember there going, fuck, what's just happened? And at that stage, I was a smoker, and mate, I went to light a smoke, and my hands just shaking uncontrollably. Like what the fuck, and fire alarms are still going off, and it was surreal.
What was the state of the other police officers around you? Were they still in that kind of what you're like how you're dealing with it now? Were they the same way, or did you speak much after it? It was all silent.
No, it was, mate, there was a lot of silence. Like it was just like I remember seeing the tactical operations guys come back up, and I remember looking at them going, "Fuck, wow, what a job!" Like, at that stage we didn't know the full extent that the manager and the hostage had been killed. We didn't know at that stage.
Yeah.
There was rumblings that there was a couple of people down.
Yeah.
But seeing those guys, like they had been out there for hours, mate, like since the beginning, and to see like the way they were, it was just made me proud to be a cop that day. That we have guys like that who are going to do those high risk jobs in not only in support of us, but for everyone out there. Was just, was a good feeling seeing those guys and knowing that they exist. And after that, so it went down. It was a long night after that, and eventually went home the next afternoon.
Yeah.
And I was dumbfounded. Like I was just thinking, what have I been involved in?
Yeah.
It
was a bit surreal, innit?
It was surreal. My boss at the time, my superintendent at the time, and my crime manager checked in on me. Nothing really hit me at that stage. It was upsetting, and particularly knowing the end result was very upsetting. But a couple of boys I worked with at the time, we had a poker night and a barbecue at his house and got on the piss, and me and the fella I was with that night, we went there and it was sort of like an unofficial debrief, which was good to talk about. Yeah, and I mean, and kind of around the time, I'd just sort of like put it in the back of my head.
It's just thought enough's enough.
Just put it in the back of my head, kept going.
Yeah.
So, and that's probably around the time I made the decision that I wanted to obviously progress my career and get out of being a detective. And I did the promotions process and actually got promoted not long after that in 2015 to a uniform sergeant, and went and worked at the proactive crime team at the Police Transport Command at Parramatta. And so I was back in uniform and sort of leading a proactive unit on our state's public transport network.
Okay.
So yeah, mate, I was there for a couple of years, and it wasn't until reflection that I looked back at my time there, and that's where I started. So I was working shift work, so I'd work, my shifts and then have a few days off.
Yeah.
So I started locking myself in my room on my days off. Didn't want to do anything. I wouldn't get out of bed. I just thought it was normal at the time. I thought, it's just, getting my rest after doing shift work. And then at the time, one of the girls that was working at the PTC in uniform, she was on secondment there from St Mary's. She used to work at St Mary's, so I knew her.
Yeah.
And she, the day that Curtis Chang was murdered at police headquarters, this young girl was on shift that day. So she wasn't on my team, she was on another team. And she was there. So she went to that job. And I remember talking to her afterwards, because at one point she had to guard the body of Curtis Chang after he'd been murdered, and listening to what she was going through and it hit her pretty hard. I don't know. I just sort of I hated the world. And at that time, I was married. My wife wanted children, and this sort of well, I don't want children. I don't want to bring a child into this world. I mean, and that ultimately led to the breakdown of my marriage at the time. That, amongst other things, I was hitting the drink pretty hardcore and masking it.
Yeah.
And mate, literally I'd work my shifts, come home and lock myself in the house and not go anywhere, not do anything. And then when my marriage broke up, I seriously contemplated leaving the police. But I just need to get out of Sydney. And then an opportunity come up, and I applied for a transfer to Huskisson down in Jervis Bay. And I won it, and I got it. And I'm like, you know what? Clean slate, breath of fresh air, get out of Sydney, go down there. And it did, yeah. It really helped, I wasn't drinking. I fell in love with the job again, I was looking after 13 police officers down there. And the way to describe it was like country policing, but by the sea.
Yeah.
So we weren't a 24-hour station. Yeah. There was literally one crew on at a time, and me as a sergeant, the supervisor, 9 times out of 10, I was part of that response crew working with the constable and going to do jobs, And it was good. I really enjoyed it, mate. It was really it wasn't as busy as working in Sydney. Yeah. Beautiful area, gorgeous area. We had a boat down there, so on days that we could, mate, we'd launch the boat down there and do boat shifts on the water. Holiday time, we got pumped. The population tripled. It pumped out there, and mate, I fell in love with the job again.
How long did it for?
So 2018, I went down there.
Yeah.
And mate, that was my last posting. That was my last station. So while I was there, we had the 2019 bushfires.
Oh yeah.
And we got hit very hard down there. About November 2019, this fire started poking its head up just south of Ulladulla. And, mate, slowly made its way up to where it pretty much wiped out Conjola, and bottom end of Sussex Inlet, and made its way up. Neil, probably one of the biggest bushfires I've ever seen, mate. It was huge. We were working on days at 11 a.m. and you're outside, and it was 1 a.m. in the morning. It was pitch black.
Wow.
That's just from the smoke. Mate, the fire behaviour I saw there scared the shit out of me. I was down at the intersection of Sussex Inlet Road and Princes Highway, when the wind changed. And I remember looking behind us, and all I saw was a wall of flames, like dead set, 100 meters tall, if not more.
I think that's the scariest thing. Like, you've been through a lot in the police force. But do you think something like that is the scariest thing that you could?
100%, because like the way this fire was moving, I'm like, where am I going? Am I going to die? Like I've got to go up that road,
Yeah.
and there is flames going right across it. And like I was there with a couple of the highway patrol people, and at one point we just ran and got into our cars and just drove to. We thought this thing was coming, like it was.
Yeah, I've seen that, especially in Wollongong. I've seen a lot of the bushfires in Wollongong when I used to live in Wollongong, and it's.
And so mate, that was a pretty big response working through that. I think end of January 2020, that kind of stopped. Yeah. And mate, that's when I crashed and burnt. You got any
regrets from working in the police force?
I still tell people to this day, it's probably one of the best jobs I worked for. Like I had so much fun doing it. I met some really great people, and I got to help a lot of people.
You need to write a book, mate.
Nah, my story's nothing compared to others.
Bro, what you've told me today, and I know you've got a lot more to say, but like, it's massive what you've seen and been through. I thank you for coming out, and because I really enjoyed this. And when you told me when we met up that time about some of the stories, I was eager to get you on the podcast. And mate, thanks for having me, Neil. This is the first time, Neil, that I've publicly told my story. And how could I not? Come on, mate. You've had Keith Banks on here. Mate, I love Keith Banks. I call him the OG GC, oh, really? The original gangster good, because he's just a good Keith. He was good. I enjoyed him. He was good. No, but thank you so much, bro. No, thanks for having me, Neil. Appreciate it, mate. Thanks, man.